Hi, I'm Nathan. You're about to travel to a place of humor, analysis, and discovery. Welcome to the Wad Fam Chalk Pod.
Hello and welcome to the Wad Fam Chalk Pod. I'm Dylan Weaver.
I'm Andrew Sabo.
And we're here to talk about an episode of Odyssey. I forgot to check the number. 128.
One bad apple.
One bad apple.
Intercepted.
However, there are more than one
Yeah.
bad apples.
Bushels, presumably.
Yeah.
Orchards full.
Uh-huh.
That's a lot of money lost on apples.
Right. And at least 3 people.
Yes.
So that
bad
is
people.
3 apples that had an actual effect on a human being. Not one. Anyways, it's an episode both written and directed by Mr. Paul McCusker.
The one and only.
Truly.
Mm-hmm.
It first aired September 15th of 1990, which is over a year after part 2 of the battle.
Okay. I was wondering if this was an Earth Day episode. It's not.
No.
That's unfortunate. I mean, it's an environment episode. It would make sense. It'd be very Odyssey to put out an Earth Day episode like that.
Would it, though? I don't think being environmentally friendly is keeping in character for this show.
No,
and
it's
we'll
not.
be talking about that.
Yes, we will.
Today.
On the Wad Fam Chalk Pod.
So, what else? This is episode 2 off of the album On Thin Ice, which is album 7.
One of the albums I owned as a child.
This episode was not included on any album until 2005. So they, on the original version of album 7 that had some other title, it was probably a series of things.
Yeah.
It did not have this episode. And then when they did the Golden Audio release in 2005, they included this episode.
Had it been recorded a long time ago and they...
Right, well, it first aired in the 90s.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know if it kept running on the radio through there. I could check real quick, because the wiki's got that kind of info. Yeah, it continued to air on the radio,
Okay.
but did not get an album release until 2005.
Interesting.
It was cut because of some controversy with this episode, of people complaining that it painted big business in a bad light, which is the most conservative of complaints.
Well, and the thing is, they address that in the
I
episode.
know!
Are you kidding me?
I know.
Thank goodness Odyssey saved face for all those big chemical companies.
Yeah. And they even bring it up in the official guide, where they're like, this episode was controversial for some listeners, who blamed it for big businesses, who thought it blamed big business for the world's environmental problems, which wasn't our intent. But due to these concerns, this episode was unreleased for very many years.
Well, okay, but again, they literally talk about that in the episode.
Yep.
We'll get into it.
Yeah. So we've got quite a few people to talk about cast-wise here. Although most of them are just small parts. The big part for this episode is Kurt Stevens, being voiced by Fabio Steffens. Possibly Stevens, might be the same last name, but it's spelled differently. The notable thing about him is that we've already talked about him as the voice of Tony in Novacom.
Oh, interesting. Tony was the guy that Whit almost adopted.
Yeah, Tony and Brianna.
Fabio Stevens. Steffens.
Brianna. Anyways, so in addition, we have Richard Goodwin voicing both Dr. Baker and Jerry Edgebiter.
What a name.
We've got Debbie Schneider as the secretary.
Yep.
Kay Lindley as the public relations rep.
Yep.
Bob Luttrell as the customer service rep.
Of course.
And Phil Lawler as Eustace.
Who's Eustace?
I do not know.
Oh, is he the security guard?
Yes, he is.
We're just gonna go with that.
Nope, he has to be because
He's the only one that we haven't accredited.
Yep.
So.
He's the
Eustace. Wow, that's a
security guard.
name.
Do they? I guess they have to say his name because it's credited, but I did not remember them saying it.
Yeah, me neither.
This is the only episode Eustace appears in.
Shocker.
Yeah.
Dylan, I think it's time to roll the promo.
Eustace is a name like Edmund that only exists in Chronicles of Narnia.
Is Eustace? Who's Eustace in
What?
Chronicles of Narnia?
He's
It's been a long time.
He's the cousin who goes in Dawn Treader. He gets turned into a dragon.
Yeah!
Spoiler alert, I guess.
Those books came out so long ago. I'm a terrible Christian. I haven't read Chronicles of Narnia in like 10 years.
I mean, I also haven't read them in that long, but I just remember them.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I wasn't really paying attention. I just read the Chronicles of Narnia because my dad said I had to do it before I could read Harry Potter. Shout out to all those Christian parents who make their kids read other books before they can read the books they want to read.
I would argue that Chronicles of Narnia is better than Harry Potter, but
It's definitely more artfully crafted, I will say that.
I mean, it is and it isn't. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe don't tweet at me about that debate.
I think C.S. Lewis is a better author than J.K. Rowling
Yes.
by far.
Yeah.
I think that he's probably a smarter person.
But we can all agree that Tolkien's best.
Yes. That's the important thing, Chalk Squad. Just know, at the end of the day, Tolkien takes all.
All right, I'm going to roll the promo.
Yes, please.
Next time on Adventures in Odyssey.
Those apples didn't come from the store. They're from Tom Riley's farm.
There's serious trouble for Tom Riley when he discovers the stream running through his land is polluted.
You're telling me the fish in the creek are dying?
They look dead.
Who's responsible?
What in the world is going on here?
Find out on the next Adventure in Odyssey.
Did somebody snap a string on a cello? Is that what that sound was? It was like, boom. What? What noise was that?
We may never know.
Probably won't.
Great intro, though.
Yeah, that was
Love it.
great. And like, it didn't give away really anything. I mean, it gave away the premise, but that's kind of what promos are for. So
Yeah, that's fair.
oh man. Okay, good job. And the music. That was good.
Yeah.
That's a top-notch promo.
Yeah.
Good job. So the episode begins with we get a Chris intro.
I was going to say, the episode begins with Chris setting the stage.
Yeah.
Setting up a pro-environment episode.
Yeah.
Which was...
confusing.
Yeah. I mean,
Surprising.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I actually have very little to complain about this episode.
No, me neither.
From the get-go, I was like, oh gosh, am I going to hate this? Oh, wait, no, do I agree with Focus on the Family?
Hold up.
If we rewind...
Hold up.
If we rewind 30 years, me and Focus are on the same page.
Yeah, pretty much. I listened to this episode twice. It holds up?
Yeah.
What? Okay.
It's just...
Good on you.
It's so interesting to track how things change over time. Because, like, Focus on the Family is always very strongly with the conservative right in everything they talk about.
Yeah,
they're
religiously.
They're a religious organization, but they are also
a Republican organization.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure Mike Pence has spoken at Focus on the Family like 18 times.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that high, but he's definitely done it.
Yep.
And so it was really wild to hear some, like, a company that has this viewpoint traditionally being like, yeah, but, like, the environment's good, guys.
Yeah.
We should protect it.
Yeah.
God gave us that. Cut to 2020.
Yeah. Where things not so good. An entire country was on fire for a little bit. That was rough.
But yeah.
No, it's a good, like you said, like, I genuinely enjoyed this episode pretty much completely. There's a couple logistic things where I was like, that's confusing. But
Yeah.
other than that, very good. So
Chris also sets the stage with the something strange and mysterious.
yeah,
Which
and mysterious.
I was like this
fruit.
this episode isn't like that far onto that, but okay.
No. Which also, how does this have anything to do with Blackgaard? I don't remember.
So,
I have no clue. Does he run Edgebiter?
No, the Edgebiter scandal becomes a big thing in Tom's campaign for mayor, which is very Blackgaard heavy.
Okay.
So it's like kind of setting the stage, but it's not going to pay off for a little while.
Interesting. I completely forgot about that. I forgot that Blackgaard was involved in Tom's race for mayor.
Yeah, we'll go through like all of the Tom for Mayor stuff.
Nice.
Within the Blackgaard Chronicles.
I completely forgot about that.
So, something to look forward to.
Yeah, definitely. Jock Squad.
So we start out with 3 sick kids that all got sick after going to Wit's End. And Connie and Wit are kind of talking about that in, I guess, Connie's only appearance in this episode. She just here at the beginning?
Unless she's there at the very end.
Oh no, she's here at the beginning, and then there's one other scene that takes place at Wit's End with her in it.
Yeah.
But it's once again, it's always funny that Connie kind of gets to be a bit player in the early Odyssey, whereas now she's like either the focus or not in it at all.
Yeah, exactly.
But here she just gets to like fill that Nick role of like someone who's
there.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
She's environmental contribution, but yeah. So basically, the common denominator is all the kids had apples.
Yeah,
there was a turnover. There was apples on a Sunday, and there was a caramel apple.
Yeah, they talk about it being a
Who puts apples on a Sunday?
Well, not only that, it's referred to as a banana split.
Yeah, and they put apples on it. What?
But yeah, apples in ice cream is not something I've ever heard of.
Especially, these aren't even canned apples.
Right, or like
these are fresh
cooked.
apples.
This is a fresh apple.
I mean, I suppose we don't know for sure they weren't cooked, but also we're under the impression that they aren't because the skin's still on the outside because that's where the insecticides are.
Yeah, that's fair. But it's not because it's from the water, so it's on the inside. I don't know. Well, oh no, I guess it. Yeah. It gets...
Point is, raw apples on a Sunday.
Right.
Strange.
Raw apples on a Sunday are strange.
Or banana split even.
Even cooked apples on a Sunday, I would raise an eyebrow.
Yeah.
I think I would enjoy it.
Yeah.
But I don't think of it.
Well...
Like apples and ice cream, apple pie and ice cream.
That's what I was thinking.
Apple dumpling and ice cream.
Yeah.
But
there's got to be that other medium there. There's got to be like, pie crust or apple dumpling filling or whatever.
Right.
Like, there has to be...
It's got to be apples in sauce, too.
Yeah, exactly. Not just cutting up apple slices and sticking them in a thing of ice cream.
Yeah, it's bizarre. Anyways.
So they got sick.
Yeah.
Point is, they got sick.
And Whit realizes that he got these apples from Tom's farm.
Yes.
Not from the store.
Yeah. And
then we cut to Tom's farm.
Yeah, with Tom and a doctor and his horses, right?
Yeah. It's,
not his wife.
The return of Rachel and Leah, although I think we only really hear from Rachel. But she's sick. She's getting a shot.
Yes.
And the doctor's like, hey, like, this isn't just like a normal sickness. Like, it seems as though she's ingested arsenic.
Yeah. Do you keep insecticides like in a place where they can get it? And she's like, well, yeah, we have them, but we keep them locked up and there's no way the horses could get to them.
Right.
And he's like, like that's confusing. I wonder if there's I wonder what's going on. And then, was it Kurt that comes up?
Yeah. Well, so they do determine that the horse was loose at one point.
Yeah.
But yes, then, Kurt shows up
and asks if the doctor operates on fish.
Yeah, so he says that he tried to go fishing down at Tom's stream.
Yeah.
But there are just a bunch of dead fish there, and you can't really catch them, and it's become this whole
Yeah, they're like caught up in the rocks. They're all bloated and like
and Tom explains that, or just tells Kurt that like, oh, like this is Dr. Baker. He says, quote, he's in the animal healing business.
Yeah. Huh. Does Focus on the Family have an issue with like the veterinary sciences? Is that a thing?
It's I
the
can't
animal
imagine.
Healing business.
It's just so weird.
Well, it's strange. They're like, why wouldn't you say he's a vet or a horse doctor?
Right.
That's like, yeah.
Yeah, you
I'm in the
introduced him
people
too
healing business.
as-
No, yes, but you're a nurse.
Right. He introduced him too as Dr. Baker.
Yes.
But then he explains that he's
And
in...
animals are so vague. Like, what?
Yeah. Anyways, and so... Yeah, and so what? Kurt... Yeah, so Kurt explains the whole thing with the things. Oh, yeah, he's got that exchange with Dr. Baker where he's like... He asks him if he operates on fish, and he's like, no, unless they have 4 legs and wear a saddle.
Yeah.
And Kurt says, oh, seahorses?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good bit.
It's pretty decent.
Yeah, that was a good joke.
But, oh, the other thing that's really cool in this scene is, so in the previous scene, Whit and Connie tried to call Tom.
Yeah.
In this scene, you hear the phone ringing in the background.
Really?
And Farber...
I missed that.
Farber. And Baker says, like, do you need to pick that up? And he says, no, I'll just let it go. Like, I'll just let it ring.
Yeah, that's so strange.
So
wow, I didn't pick up on that.
It's
That's
a really
so cool.
fun continuity thing.
Yeah.
That I quite like.
It's so funny that Odyssey does that sometimes, but not all the time.
Yeah, well, it's like they care to explain why Tom wouldn't pick up the phone.
Yeah, exactly.
It's because he's with an animal healer.
Which sounds a lot more witchcrafty than anything else.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And then, so then it cuts to what? Tom, Whit, and Connie at Whit's End.
And Tom's kind of he's pretty broken up.
Yeah,
like
he says he should have known, and Connie's like, well, like, how could you have known? Like, how would you have known that the water was contaminated or anything like that? Because they basically deduce that the horse drank the water when she got out. She drank the water from the stream, and she used the water to irrigate the orchard, and so the apples are contaminated, and the horse is sick.
Right.
And the people are sick as a result from eating the apples.
Yep.
And Tom is really upset, and he's like, well, even 1 is too many, but like 3 kids, like that's really not good. And he basically blames himself, which is very unfortunate, because like there's really no way that he could have known that was the case. And Connie's like actually a very good job of like trying to comfort him there.
Yeah, they're both Connie and Whit are really good in this scene. Whit asks if he's been able to talk to anybody from the government, and Tom hasn't been able to get a hold of them. And Connie makes
it's like our tax dollars at work. I'm like, oh, there it is.
Thanks. Good
Focus
save.
on the Family.
But then Whit explains that there were cutbacks, which is why this is happening, implying that their taxes went down. Like, if they had been paying more taxes, this would have worked.
Yes.
But because they're not paying many taxes, it doesn't, which is very funny.
Take that, Connie. Katie Lee. Actually,
Don't drag
I
Katie Lee.
I don't want to bring
She
her
seems
into
like
this.
a decent person.
She's a nice gal.
And so, Tom's like, I'm gonna like take this on myself.
Yeah, exactly. Like he wants to figure it out.
And so we cut to him and Kurt.
Yeah. Why is Kurt still there?
Well, so this episode was written to be Bernard instead of Kurt. But Dave Madden wasn't available.
That would
so
make a
they
lot more sense.
Rewrote it as Kurt.
Yeah.
And yes, it does make a lot more sense when you
there's just
realize
a
it's
kid.
Bernard, especially later in the episode when they get
arrested.
Right, when they get caught by a securody guard.
There's a
and
child
it's just
there.
there's just a child along.
Of course,
So-
naturally. That was like one of my big theological logical beefs with this episode. It's like, why is Kurt everywhere?
Yeah, I really would have enjoyed
a Bernard
in this. Like,
oh
Kurt's,
my gosh.
Kurt's good, but
Yeah.
just imagine Bernard.
Bernard and Tom riffing in the creek and stuff, because I think that they left a lot of the same dialogue.
Yes.
It looks like.
Yeah, I I knew that when I was listening to the episode and was like, oh, wow, like I can definitely see points at which this would have been the case.
He sounds like a joke machine, like Bernard. So basically, yeah, they're creek stomping, I guess. Basically, they're like walking up in the creek and they're looking for stuff, and they find a barrel in the creek.
Right.
And the barrel says edge biter or edge bite, and Kurt recognizes it as the new company that just built offices upstream next to the comic book store that he goes to.
Right.
And so they're like, oh, okay, well, obviously they make insecticides and stuff like that, and the barrel's in the creek, and so the creek's contaminated, and they try to move the barrel to look at the name, and this is when we get Kurt going, I've got a hernia, I need workman's comp.
Yes.
And that would have been a great, like, that sounds like a Bernard line.
Yeah, very much so. I'm honestly keeping in the trend of being surprised at what Focus is willing to say in this episode. It seems, I mean, I guess later we have Power Boy and whatnot, but it seems weird to be mentioning comics without it being a negative.
Yeah. Like, oh, these are a thing. Well, because comics in early Odyssey are pretty much either a waste of money or, like, a cult.
Right. Well, that is very much how conservative Christianity in general deals with them, especially when we're talking about the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
So it's just like, here, it's just part of the world, and we don't care about it.
Yeah.
And I like it.
And that probably has to do with the fact that it was originally written for Bernard, and they were like, okay, shoot, how do we make this relevant for a kid?
Comic books?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it doesn't make sense that a comic book store would be next to Edgebiter Chemicals. It probably makes sense that a cleaning supply store was next to Edgebiter Chemicals.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they probably completely fabricated that they he probably bought chemicals from Edgebiter. Like, he probably bought cleaning stuff.
Yeah, maybe, or maybe it was just like, but it definitely seems like it's an industrial park.
Yeah,
which doesn't lend itself
a business
to comic
park.
book stuff.
Yeah. And then they're talking about it, and then when Kurt gives the line, I don't know, they don't keep their brochures in with the comic books. And then Tom goes, oh, well, you know, how much you want to bet they make insecticides? And Kurt goes, I want to think the best of people.
Yeah.
And Tom goes, sure you do, Kurt. Sure you do. They're like, what the heck, Tom?
Yeah.
Why? Why are you bullying this child?
Tom isn't great in this episode.
No. I mean, he's not bad. It's just, I think that it would make a lot more sense if it was Bernard.
Yeah.
Like, what is his connection with Kurt? Like, do they have this kind of banter?
Right.
Like, whatever.
Does Kurt fish outside of this episode?
Yeah, exactly. Where Bernard goes fishing constantly on this album.
Right.
Like, ice fishing.
Ice fishing is Tom and Whit. There is not Bernard.
Bernard doesn't go with?
Correct.
Have I made this mistake before?
Tom, and Whit. You got called out in our interview on the Welcome to Odyssey blog for saying that it was a Bernard episode, and people in the comments
attacked me.
Yep.
Violently. I'm scarred.
Clearly.
I was sent much hate mail. I was not sent any hate mail.
Sent any hate mail, folks.
Yeah, so basically then Tom and Kurt, so they found this barrel. Then they go to Edgebiter, and this is when we get this delightful, like, bit of corporate runaround where they're like, they go to the office, they want to talk to somebody, then they talk to the wrong person, and then they talk to the wrong person again, and then they basically once they finally get to the HR person, she's like, oh, well, there's no way that we would have done that, like, we care a lot for the environment, there's no way, like, you can take my word for it, and Kurt and Tom are just kind of left, like, oh.
Yeah,
we got nowhere.
Yep, and with one of the middle people, Odyssey does its classic bit of the person in authority mispronounces someone's name.
Yeah,
by calling him Mr. Ryder.
Yeah, Mr. Ryder. And there's all the bit with the horse being his wife, like Rachel. Yeah. Rachel? No, my horse.
Yeah,
your wife? My horse.
My horse. Also, they do find out, though, that Edgebiter is one of the largest suppliers of insecticide.
Yes.
They also find out that the chemicals were manufactured in Chicago.
Yes.
and that one barrel would not be enough to
Contaminate
the creek.
which is big because meanwhile, Whit has been going off doing things and testing water. And so Whit and Tom are at Whit's end.
Yep.
And they're talking.
Yeah. And Tom says, I'm not what you'd call an environmentalist.
Yeah.
As if that's something you wouldn't want to be.
Yeah. Or that you would call somebody.
Yeah. But
that Tom, he's a real environmentalist.
He just he keeps talking and he's like, pollution's something that happens other places, not here in Odyssey.
Yeah, exactly. You don't think that happened? And doesn't Chris say something? Or maybe that's at the end of the episode. She says something
I believe so.
Not in Odyssey. Like, what do you mean? Pollution's everywhere. Are you kidding me? Anywhere there is business, there is pollution. There's light pollution. There's stuff. Oh gosh, pollution. Not good.
Yep, agreed. And so then Tom, Whit, and Kurt start sneaking around the Edgebiter plant, building, whatever.
We should go back. I should clarify. So basically, Whit then tells Tom that he did a bunch of testing on his own. He tested the water in the creek. Yes, there's arsenic. Then he checked it upstream. Yes, there's arsenic. But then he checked because it feeds. I think it feeds from Trickle Lake.
Yes.
And then there's no arsenic in Trickle Lake, and there's no arsenic in even the stuff that feeds into Trickle Lake. So it's definitely along the river. And so when they're trespassing at night, Edgebiter is the only building there. And so they're walking around, and Tom's like, I don't feel so good about trespassing. And Whit's like, what do you mean? We're in a parking lot at night. We're not trespassing. And he's like, oh, okay. And Kurt's there.
Yep.
Because we take our 12-year-olds when we go parking lot sitting at, midnight.
Yeah, no, that's my plan.
They go down to the creek.
If it's not illegal, why are you doing it at night, Whit?
Exactly. Well, he's got a shop. He's got money to make or not make, I suppose.
So they're going. They kind of go around the building and they see that there's a warehouse in the back. Because they had previously been told that there aren't chemicals in there. That it's just like a marketing place.
Yeah, it's just basically a storefront.
Right. And so there's
a warehouse in the back.
There's a warehouse, and they see that there's a drain leaving the warehouse that heads right to the creek. And then they get caught by a security guard who walks up behind them with some great sound.
Yeah.
And,
all right, don't make any sudden moves.
Yep.
And then it cuts to commercial.
Yep.
And, okay, one, what security guard talks like that? Two,
Eustace.
I thought I guess. And two, I thought this guy was a thug when I first said it. And I was like, oh, they just got in with the mob. Okay. This is a mob episode.
Yeah, clearly.
And, because, basically, it sounds like he has them at gunpoint, basically. Even though they don't specify that. But,
yeah. It does have a gunpoint sound to it.
Yeah. And then they bring him back to the office. And Tom's, asking all kinds of questions. And Eustace, aforementioned security guard, is very upset. And he goes, oh, I can't answer any of your questions, whatever. Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I just need you to sit and be quiet and whatever. And he's like, I don't want to have to call the police. And Whit's like, well, no, I'd love for you to call the police because I've got questions about that drain that you have going into the creek. And Eustace is really upset. And then Mr. Edgebiter himself comes in.
Yes, Jerry Edgebiter.
Jerry Edgebiter. What an unfortunate last name to have.
Yep. He is the owner of this company.
Yes.
That is in Chicago as well as Odyssey.
Yeah. Worldwide, isn't it? It's like the...
Yeah. It's
one of the
biggest suppliers of insecticide in the world.
Or is it worldwide? Or
at least in the States. It doesn't super matter. But they do make it clear that this is the corporate headquarters for Edgebiter.
Yeah.
So it kind of sort of makes sense that he'd be there. But regardless,
it's 12 at night.
Right, what is he doing? They woke him up in the middle of the night and said, there were 3 people walking around your property. And he's like, all right, I'll get right over there. Don't involve the police.
Yeah. Jerry, Jerry's a real.
Don't use
swell
my
dude.
secretary or my thugs. I need to be there in person.
Of course, naturally. Well, I mean, his thugs are definitely still there. Yeah. So then they go through their names and whatever. It's like, oh, I'm John Avery Whittaker. I'm Tom Riley. And then Kurt, and he goes, oh, I'd prefer to remain anonymous. And then Whit just goes, Kurt Stevens. Like, what?
Whit knows best.
Yeah, exactly. Just throw out names of this 12-year-old. That's with you.
Right. Yeah. Obviously.
Yeah.
You know, as we all do.
Yeah.
But yeah. So Edgebiter explains that while there's nothing being poured into the creek, they had an accidental spill a little while ago, and it has continued to leak.
Yeah.
And that they ran that drain into the water.
Yeah.
Illegally.
Yeah.
As a cost-saving maneuver.
Yeah.
And they don't have a license to store chemicals here. So yeah, that's not looking great
For them, no. Not at all.
And so when they were poking around earlier that day,
Yeah.
It raised, I guess, flags within the company, and they investigated and found where the leak was happening and stopped it. But they haven't reported that to government officials because they
thought that they had taken care of it themselves and they didn't want it. Because the whole big thing is, at least the whole picture that Focus on the Family, or the writers, I should say, are painting of Edgebiter is that they're this big company and they put on this really friendly face, but behind the scenes, they do things that aren't good and aren't legal.
Right.
And so they're talking like, oh, we don't get the police involved because we've worked really long and really hard to have a good reputation and we don't want to ruin that. And Whit's kind of skeptical of it because, obviously you broke the law and you have to have repercussions. And then Mr. Edgebiter basically flips the tables and goes on his little soapbox.
Well, yeah, so he brings up that he offers to pay for to cover the expenses if they keep quiet.
Yeah.
They've got over 200 people employed and doesn't want them to lose their jobs.
Yeah.
And promises that this won't happen again. And what's kind of like, well, what about when it does?
Yeah. What about what? Yeah. There's no way that I can guarantee that this won't happen again with you left unchecked in this way.
Right. Exactly. This is what government regulation
is for.
Do you hear that? Focus on the Family? This is what government
Government bad! Texas bad!
Yeah. Government regulation.
Pretty important with chemicals.
Yeah. And maybe they'd agree with that. Who's to say?
Who's to say? Tweet at us.
And so, yeah, Edgebiter then flips the tables, like you said.
Yeah, he flips it and he basically says, everybody hates on big bad chemical companies and big bad corporations for the environmental woes, and we try really hard because they give us these really strict regulations and we do our best to kind of to play the game, and it's very, very inconvenient and it's very, very expensive to operate under these regulations. And so we cut some corners and we put this drain in, but Whit, what do you do with all the waste that you have? And Kurt, what do you do with all the waste that you have? And Tom, what do you do with all the waste that you have? And he goes into specifics, like with Whit, it's like plastic spoons and jugs, and for Kurt, it's comic books and whatever, which of course he knows he reads comic books because whatever. And then when Kurt goes like, oh, you don't have to get so personal.
Yeah, but his quote is, you probably read comic books. What happens to them when you're finished?
You keep them?
Put them on a shelf. Nobody's throwing away comic books when they finish them.
Yeah. Is that a thing that people did or do?
I can't imagine.
They're expensive.
Yeah, I mean, they're not cheap. You hold on to them. You read them again. They're like any other book.
Yeah.
If they had said newspapers.
Yeah.
Sure.
But do you throw out
comic books? No, people keep those.
But gum wrappers.
Right, yeah. But
basically he's like, well, what regulations are in there for you guys? And then he just kind of walks out and he's basically like, you can do what you want, but also just know that you aren't innocent here either.
Right. And so we cut to Wit's End, where Wit has gone ahead and gotten the government involved in this.
Yeah.
Which there's a moment there where you're like, is he going
Yeah. The way that this
definitely...
episode is set up, it definitely sounds like, oh, that's a pretty compelling argument. Maybe Wit doesn't say anything.
Right.
And, really what ends up happening is it's a D all of the above situation where it's, he talks to the government, but he's also like, well, we need to take responsibility for what we're doing.
Which is the correct play. Absolutely. I just didn't know if the show was going to be able to stick the landing.
And to go either or, I figured because there were two options presented that one of them, neither of them were picked. It was a mystery third option.
And so, he kind of sits down and is with Kurt and with Tom and is like, hey, the dude made good points. We gotta take this into account and actually be I'm gonna try and figure out how to make less waste here at Wit's End. I suggest you guys do the same. And there's the quote of most things that I think Tom says it. Most things that are worthwhile take some effort to maintain.
Yeah.
Which is really good and really true. And
no, definitely
love it.
And Wit's very empathetic, and Wit goes a little bit fear-mongery at the end.
Yeah, but there's also a good line in there too, where he's like, for every one company that does this, there are 200 that don't. Don't. Yeah, I mean, it's that thing that this episode was accused of being anti-big business, and clearly he's setting up of this isn't everyone, and we're all responsible for this. Yeah. I think it's so interesting to have the villain of the episode teach Wit a lesson.
Yeah.
He's still wrong, and he's still the villain. He still gets his comeuppance, but Wit changes as a result.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, I can't think of another time where that really happens. Although, I guess maybe in the case of the secret room where, Wit kind of wins, but he's like, well, now I have this constant reminder of death and money and greed in my basement,
Yeah, it's really pleasant to hear.
It's a different episode.
Yeah.
It's very different. Obviously within the context of Blackgaard, it feels very strange. But it, I don't know, just compared to greater canonical Odyssey, it's very different.
Yeah, and in Chris's outro, she says, this is the only planet we have. We must all work to protect it.
Yeah.
Which is
good.
A great sentiment.
Yep.
I agree. I feel like everyone should be on the same page about that.
Yeah.
And yet, somehow, that is not the case.
Yeah. Well, and I think it has to do with the understanding of what are the consequences of the alternative. And, I think that what has happened with climate change is, it, like you said, it's become a very, very partisan issue, and then it becomes a stigma of, okay, these people are saying that this is going to happen if we don't do this, and these people are saying this is going to happen, and so who's right? Whereas really what I like about this episode is that it's kind of no, it's not really about what's going to happen. It's about we have this thing, and it doesn't matter. We should take care of this thing.
Right. Be good stewards, perhaps?
Hey, that sounds awfully biblical there. Be careful.
Yeah, my bad. But yeah, it's kind of...
I like how it flipped on its head like that. I really like that Wit kind of learned a lesson.
Yeah.
And I like that the big companies, because the truth of the matter is, big companies do a lot of environmental damage.
Right.
But it's also not just their responsibility.
Right.
So.
And it's also the responsibility of the government and regulators to keep those in check.
Yeah.
And private citizens to speak out when necessary.
Yeah.
And this episode does all of those things. And
that is all.
Yeah, it just feels like somewhere in the, 25, 30 years after this episode came out, that became like, yeah, I guess the partisanship of it happened, and now this is no longer like, now this doesn't seem to line up with the general stance of,
is climate change real? Is it not real?
And it's,
what's the agenda here?
right. It's so interesting to see like, oh, if we flash back to the early 90s, like, focus on the family, and or at least the writers of this show or whatever are like making good points, saying stuff that like I agree with currently.
It's like what was that episode post? Was the Kanye and Mitch stuff with the girl who played basketball?
Pink is not my color.
Pink is not my color. Where it's like, I think they did it on accident, but they did a really good thing.
That one very much feels on accident. This one feels like they're coming at it intentionally.
Yeah.
But that somewhere over the years that needle has moved.
Yeah.
And it no longer is in line with, but also, I don't know, we're making a lot of generalizations here about, conservative Christianity in the US and like how that functions. I don't know for a fact what focus on the family's stance on environmental stuff is. Yeah. I'm just making assumptions because of like where they usually sit.
Well, and they do get pretty politically involved.
Yeah.
Like they're very much like, we will throw our name in the ring of politicians.
Right. But
And use
our
brand as a platform for politicians.
Yeah, I don't want to assume the worst of
Sure
them
you
in
do,
this.
Dylan.
Thank you. Very nice. I want to try and assume good things here, and also acknowledge that even if focus on the family's agenda has shifted, or they'd be more against this episode now, that's not to say that like the people who made this episode don't still believe these things.
Exactly.
Like I can't pretend to know the inner workings of
everything that's going on.
Focus on the Family as a company, of their involvement with Adventures in Odyssey,
their
and their
brand stipulations and all that.
It's a lot. There's obviously a lot of moving pieces here, and it is complex.
That's probably why Odyssey doesn't really get involved in a lot of non-Christian moral dilemmas.
Yeah. What I don't want to do here is just for me to like come down and be like, well, it's very clear that like they no longer believe what they were preaching back then, because like I can't pretend to know what's going on there.
Exactly.
And so I just want to make that clear here at the end that I'm not.
Well, and this is a good thing. Like,
I'm making a ton of generalizations about where, about how Odyssey and Focus have changed over the years. I can't truly speak to that. But
as a podcast that reviews Adventures in Odyssey episodes,
right,
we're looking at the episode One Bad Apple and saying, hey, we like this one.
Right. We like this one. We like what it stands for, and I feel like
yes, more please.
Yeah, just like that this is it's a good episode. It manages to balance both sides and not like lean too far one way or the other. It does
good with characters. It pits like, it doesn't make wit God or anything like that, or it doesn't. It makes the bad guy empathetic. It makes the victims very supportive. Like it's very almost realistic in the sense that like it doesn't seem larger than life. There is no binary. These are the bad guys. These are the good guys.
It plays out very nicely, and I like the thoughtfulness here.
Yeah.
And maybe that thoughtfulness continues. Maybe it doesn't. Mm-hmm. Who knows? But in this instance,
good job.
I really like what it has to say.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, do you have any other closing thoughts? Because that seems like a pretty good note to go out on.
Those are my closing thoughts, Andrew.
Yeah, those are my closing thoughts as well.
So the discussion questions for this episode, which are, worth stating at least, were Whit, Tom, and Kurt wrong to walk around Edgebiter after hours?
I think it comes down to are they on private property? Are they trespassing? Because then you're breaking the law, and then that's technically wrong.
Right.
However, like, were they morally wrong aside from potentially breaking the law? I don't think so. They're concerned about the environment. They're doing it. I don't, like you said, like, why are they going at night if they aren't breaking the law?
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess what would they have done alternatively? They would have had to wait for the government to go out and get them
Right.
protect, like, warrants and whatever.
And I do kind of...
That doesn't make for compelling audio drama.
No, but like it probably would have been the right thing to do there. But they bring up, like, you know, at the end there, like, well, like, what are the odds that warehouse is going to be completely empty when the government gets there now?
Yeah.
And so, yeah. But if they hadn't traipsed around and the government wouldn't have been tipped off, then maybe it would have worked out too. So, yeah, they didn't necessarily need to take it into their own hands, but I don't know that they were wrong to do so.
Yeah, especially because the methods weren't, like, explicitly illegal. Especially if
Right.
the creek is, like, public property.
Right. And then just the other big question of, why is it important to take care of our environment?
Dylan, why is it important for us to take care of our environment?
This is the only planet we have, and we must work to protect it.
Yeah, that's
to quote
it.
Chris.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because there's a lot of, like, I don't know if you knew this, but my dad actually just taught at Sunday school at church to the kids about this exact thing of just being stewards of the earth and, like, what does God say about caring for the earth. And it's very interesting. And I think my biggest thing is how we treat the earth reflects how we think about humans and, like, how we care about humans. So, like, even if you don't fully subscribe to climate change, but you know that there's some research out there that, hey, this is not really good. There are practices that aren't, you know, environmentally suitable, and it's really just because of a consumerist economy of, you know, excess and whatever. Even if you don't go there, like, you can look at it pretty objectively and say, okay, we have deforested most of the Amazon rainforest. That's not good because there are people that live there. And we're taking away their home. And yes, they bought the land and technically they have the right to do it, but those are indigenous people. They don't really participate in our economy, and they probably don't even know what's, like, they're not fully capable of understanding what's going on. And that, yeah, I think, at least for me, my semi soapbox is just like, if you really love your neighbor as yourself, you're gonna put aside some of your profit margin to take care of them. And if that's not chopping down the Amazon rainforest completely for cattle or whatever, or that's not whatever, like, it could be any multitude of things, then love your neighbor as yourself. You gotta take care of them. And that, I think, a part of that is taking care of the earth. Like, God made this thing. He made it to be good. It was good when he made it. Sin entered the world, and not all economic development and technology is sinful, but, you know, where is God in deforestation? Like, where is Jesus in the wildfires in Australia? Like, where are they? If you can't find them, then maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should think twice.
Cool.
I don't have anything to promote this week.
Yeah, neither do I. So we're checking out for this episode, and we are going to be back in a week.
7 whole days.
Oh man,
Several
can't
hours.
wait.
Can't wait. No wakes.
Wake
me up inside.
So we'll be back next week with episode 155, Waylaid in the Windy City, Part 1.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Wadfam Chalk Pod is a presentation of the Lidditz Podcast Co-op. This show is a fan podcast and has no official affiliation with Adventures in Odyssey or Focus on the Family. As such, the copyright is ours under Creative Commons. Follow the podcast at wadfamchalkpod on Twitter and Instagram, or email us at wadfamchalkpod@gmail.com. One Bad Apple was hosted by Dylan Weaver and Andrew Acebo and edited by Dylan Weaver. And I'm Nathan Haverstick, hoping you'll join us again next time for more of the Wad Fam Chalk Pod.